Okay, welcome back to the very last part of Lecture 7, COMP3020, Professional Ethics in Computing. In this video, we'll be going through qualitative methods. Hopefully you've watched the other two videos, so you should know by now what qualitative methods are, that they are a more experiential and subjective capturing of data that can help you to answer questions around how people feel about something, how they experience something. So the kinds of methods that we can use for qualitative data collection, some of these are repeated from the quantitative data methods, but the ways that they're used are very different. So for example, interviews are very common in qualitative data collection, and these can be done on a one-on-one basis or group interviews where you interview several people at the same time. And again, you can do semi-structured interviews are very, very common because it can help you follow up. You can do structured interviews as well, where you're asking a set list of questions and don't deviate from those. And the questions that you're asking, instead of trying to get a true or false statement, you're trying to explore the perspectives of the people that you're interviewing, their experiences, their opinions, their behaviours. Similarly, focus groups and workshops is where you will bring together small groups of participants. So typically somewhere between 5 and 10, although they can, of course, be bigger or smaller than that. And then in these groups, you discuss a specific topic and you allow for interaction and diverse viewpoints. So these focus groups and workshops differ from interviews because you encourage more interaction between the participants. You encourage them to talk to each other as well. And you might even introduce things like activities or prompts to get people talking about the topic that you want them to talk about, or creating other bits of text that you can analyze, like post-it notes or posters or what are they called? Little model versions of things, prototypes. Again, you can use observations in qualitative data collection. In the quantitative session, we talked about how you could do observation where you would try and capture very specific timings or frequency, like numerical parts of observation. In qualitative data collection, we focus more on observing people in their natural environment. So you would rarely try to do observations in a controlled environment like a lab. It tends to be in their natural environment. And you do a deep understanding of behaviours and interactions. So you might be person A talked to person B for 15 minutes and person C looked sad. So you can capture more nuanced reflections on how people are interacting with one another. But this can, of course, take a lot more time than the quantitative version. Once again, you can do surveys and questionnaires. But in qualitative data collection, surveys and questionnaires would have open-ended survey questions. So if you remember back to the session that we did where we were talking about what our research question was going to be, open-ended questions are ones where you can answer in more than one way and in more than one word. So there might be an open text box that people can write in, or they can pick what words they want to use to answer the question. So it tends not to use Likert scales or multiple choice. It tends to be more focused on open-ended questions. We can also use case studies in qualitative data. So this is where we do an in-depth analysis of a specific case. We might pull from multiple data sources for that case. So we might use interviews, observations, documents. And by documents, this can include things like newspaper clippings, audio recordings, pictures that people have taken. And then we will do this very, very in-depth examination of this one specific example. And then the last one is content analysis. So a content analysis is where we systematically analyze what we call texts. So again, texts can be more or less any artifact left over from people. So a text can be, of course, written words, but it can also include pictures, videos, audio, visual data, and we will analyse that data to try and identify what themes and patterns are emerging. If we can see similarities occurring again and again in different texts, or differences or things that even aren't present in the data that we expected would be. So there are lots of course, advantages for qualitative research methods. You get a very in-depth understanding of your subject matter. It can be very nuanced, and it can allow you to explore very complex phenomena that has lots and lots of inputs and variables in it, which really allows you to get into the deep, dark depths of human experience. Qualitative research is very flexible. You can adapt it on the fly almost to what is happening, the data you're collecting, how people are interacting with you. And so you can kind of choose to follow rabbit holes that in quantitative data you wouldn't be able to. So if you're asking questions where you think there might be something that you haven't thought of yet, you may want to use a qualitative method that's going to give you that flexibility. It's really good at finding insider perspectives, so it helps you to gain your own perspective of being an insider by involving yourselves in the research, learning about different people's experiences, maybe even getting your own experience of a phenomena, which can lead to really rich and contextually relevant findings. It's also really great for contextualization. So if you remember in the quantitative data, that was fantastic for giving us really specific examples of a question with controlled variables, but it wasn't really helpful in looking at the wider context of what else might affect the phenomena that we're studying. So qualitative method is really good for getting into that contextualization and looking at the broader picture of the social, cultural, or organizational influences that might affect the phenomena, the system, the technology. Qualitative research is very exploratory. It's really well suited for exploring new and uncharted areas, questions that people haven't asked before, topics where you might even not know yet what the questions are. You can explore to find out a little bit more about what you need to then question further. And it's really great for participant involvement. People get very involved in qualitative research that they might not so much in quantitative, because you have this personal interaction with them, whether it's in focus groups where they're interacting with you and other people, or interviews where you're spending a lot of one-on-one time with someone, or observations where you are spending time integrating yourself into an environment. It can really help you foster a deeper connection, but also help them to open up to you and get involved in your research and invested in it, and even help shape it further down the line. There are, of course, disadvantages for qualitative research as well. It is incredibly time-consuming. Qualitative research takes a long time. Qualitative analysis takes even longer because you have so many details that you're trying to capture. You have so many different ways to interpret it. You have to involve different steps to try and create the validity and reliability that are very inherent in quantitative data. You have to go out of your way to try and make them available in qualitative data. It's also very subjective, which means that it's very easy for you to introduce these biases or assumptions of your own when you're coming into it. It relies on interpretation and analysis of researchers, so data might not be as reliable, which doesn't mean it's not helpful or useful or valid. It just means that it might not be as replicable. Other people would get different results if they asked the same questions. For this reason, it also means that qualitative data is often limited in how generalizable it is. You're working very in-depth with a small group of people or one-on-one with someone, and generally what you're finding is very specific to them, and it's difficult to understand how that might be scaled up to a broader scale, which also in turn means that you can't use qualitative data for population summaries. It's not designed to understand this big picture, to find these rules that everyone follows. It's designed to understand the context of a situation or the specific experiences that someone has had with the phenomena or with the technology. And then it's also very difficult to execute. It takes a lot of time, as we've already said, but it also requires a lot of knowledge and experience and skills. No one starts being a qualitative researcher well. It takes a lot of sort of trial and practice to get good at learning how to do qualitative data, how to know which rabbit holes to chase, how to not impress your own biases and assumptions within the data. And so it can take a longer time and more effort to do qualitative research. So what is good qualitative research? What makes a qualitative project? Quality qualitative data is credible. It is believable and accurate. So even if it is not generalizable, even if you can't say this data definitely means this for these other people, you can believe that what the study is saying is true, that the experiences that have been captured and documented and analyzed have been done so in a way that is credible and believable. And often this means doing some triangulation, so comparing different data sets, bringing in other ways of increasing the credibility, so perhaps getting multiple people to do analysis and then comparing it. Qualitative data is dependable, it's consistent and stable, the findings could be repeated under similar conditions. They won't be, because you can't create the same conditions that qualitative research comes from again, but theoretically they could be. It's confirmable. The objectivity and neutrality of the researcher is ensured and explained within the data, and any steps to reduce personal bias have been taken and explicitly shared. Qualitative data is transferable. There are elements of the project that you can say this will probably apply in other contexts as well, and here's why we think that. And then it's reflexive. So qualitative researchers have to be aware of their own biases and assumptions, their roles, the impact that their being in a space has on people who they are being studied. And this should be a very transparent process where you share that with anyone who is interacting with your data. So if you publish it, you need to share a reflexivity statement so that they can understand the steps that you've taken to reduce your bias, but also understand that it's impossible to completely remove your bias and that there will be a certain flavour of yourself still left within the dataset. So when you are recommending research methods for your businesses to use in your report, you don't have to use just one method. You don't have to recommend just one tool that they can use. You need to be thinking about what methods are suitable for your topic, what resources you have available as a business, things like the timescale that you are suggesting for the research. Will it be a short-term project or a long-term project? What is the cost of doing the research? Can your business sustain it? You need to think about who you need to collect the data from. Who are the main stakeholders that you've identified that would provide the data that you need, and how you'll actually collect the data from them. If you need to go to them, bring them to you, if you can do it online. And you need to think ultimately about the research question or questions that you have. What kind of answers are going to be most useful for you as a business to take forward into the action plan and to actually address the ethical concern that you have. So it may be that you need just one method that you will recommend because it can very concretely answer the question that you have. It may be that you need to suggest several different methods that will interact together to kind of answer different parts of the research question. So thinking about your specific topic, all of the different elements we've talked about so far, with the professional codes and the ethics and the legal analysis, What methods are going to give you the answers that you want? The answers that you are trying to find. We don't want answers because then we're going in biased, right? So lots of different things that need to consider. There are no completely right answers to these questions. No one is ever going to say to you, there is only one way to do this research. However, there are probably methods that are more suitable than others. So talk to the other members of your group, have a good conversation about how the different methods might play out in answering your question, and think about which ones you want to recommend going forward. So in this week's workshop on Thursday, we're going to be looking at the Post Office Horizon IT scandal. This will be a sensitive topic, so we will all be very respectful and professional whilst dealing with it, but it is a very, very important topic because it's a huge example of what happens when ethics are not fully considered in IT. And it's a really, really important example of why we as IT professionals need to be very aware of what we're doing and how other people might be affected going forward. So we will be using the ethical theories from Damien's workshop last week to think about the different stakeholders involved in this case study. And this is going to contribute again to our argument formation skills, which you will be using to film both your debate assessment and to write your group report. So the homework is on the screen here. Please have a look at the reading and resources available on the Moodle and create a timeline for the scandal, showcasing key moments and which stakeholders were involved in each of the key moments. And then write 3 sentences, one for each of the big 3 ethical theories from last week, about how a stakeholder that you've identified in your timeline might explain or think about the post office scandal. There are some references here that you can go and read if you would like some more information about research methods. These are really accessible and all available through the library, or the first one is open access and available online. And hopefully I will see some of you in the lecture slot on Wednesday lunchtime, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about this or about anything else that's come up in the course so far. So thank you all very much, and I will see you on Thursday.